Welcome. I really appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts with you today. It's amazing to think that this is the 5th time that we have actually been here. But I will tell you the one thing different between this and 5 years ago is at least I see some familiar faces, and some of them are mildly friendly. So thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. I'm Don Pearson with Inductive Automation. With me here today is Kevin McCluskey. He is the co-director of sales engineering, along with Travis Cox in our organization. So we'll sort of be changing off back and forth here in the middle of the presentation. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we've been around for 15 years in the industry. We are in 100 plus countries now. We go to market through integrators. We have 1,600 plus integrators now in our integrator program, and doing those installations in those countries across the world. We've managed to grow to 48 of Fortune 100 companies, and we're somewhere just short of 30%, I think, of Fortune 500 in terms of ignition installations, 56% of global manufacturing, and 64% of the top US manufacturing have ignition. I'm not saying they have ignition across their entire enterprise. What I'm saying is they have an installation, but it's also true with ignition that it's a pretty much of a seed and grow kind of installation, because once it gets in with the unlimited licensing and project model, it tends to expand and grow across that organization. These are some bullet points of why I think it's gotten such great feedback and reception is the unlimited licensing model across platform based on IT standard technologies, scalable server client, web-based, web-managed, web launch on desktop or mobile. It's modular configurability and it's rapid development and deployment. That is, I think, brings us to what I wanted to do to sort of set up today's announcement a little bit. I want to put just a little bit of context around it. And what we're going to do is really try and respect the very tight schedule that exists today and leave 5 minutes at the end for question marks. I do tend to talk a little bit fast. I don't know how it happened since I was raised in Montana, but once in New York, a guy said, "Snap it up, buddy, snap it up. Let's go faster here." So depends on the audience, I guess, a little bit. Just to comment here, since we've been coming to this conference, amazing evolution in terms of the industry and transition, the digital enterprise, how you get value, and even the digitizing and securing industry and infrastructure in cities from this year's conference. It's been, I think, important to us, and one of the reasons we've continued to be very supportive of ARC is you're always pushing to what we see as happening out in the industry also, and it also drives us as far as the development of what we are doing with our software. But in the larger context of the challenges that you have been focusing on here at this conference, there was a study by I think the World Economic Forum, last year it came out, so it's a year old, that said when you look at companies adapting to all these digital disruption technologies, that business leaders, 84% of them expect IoT to really disrupt their operating model over the next 5 years. So that was last year, so now we're talking about between now and 2022. But if you take another data point, only 7% of those leaders have a comprehensive IoT strategy, which means somewhere in the neighborhood of 85, 90% don't have a clue at all of what they're going to do. 70% of that 84% basically admit to having none at all. And when we look at that and we take a look at what we need to bring to the market and the contribution that we need to make, we say we got a problem. There is a huge gap between reality and the ideal and the real. And how do you think we're going to bridge that gap over the next, let's say, 4 years during this disruption time? And the interesting point is that this same study said that by adopting digitally controlled business and manufacturing processes, global factories are set to secure 100 trillion with a T of combined value society and industry by 2025. No matter how you look at that, that's a decent sized number, and it is a lot of value. You know, the first time we put this slide together, none of us noticed that we actually didn't have enough zeros in it, so we had to go back and correct it. So we couldn't think with 100 trillion, you know. But when you take a look at big data and Industry 4.0 and the whole evolution, it's an interesting as a company to try and supply that. We're strive to really listen to our customers and to bring what's needed there. A couple of years ago, here in this room, we actually announced the in 2016, I think it was, 3 MQTT modules by Cirrus Link Solutions, the distributor, engine, and transmission. And the whole idea there was to add IIoT functionality and connectivity of the transport vehicle that would work, to lower bandwidth requirements, and really help companies scale out and reach the value. The whole point was to change traditional pole response and stop directly connecting to devices, and the new architecture that leveraged MQTT as a publish-subscribe protocol allowed you to do that. It pushed the pole into the edge of the network, and it made it instantly accessible, and it also did it without putting a big strain on the bandwidth. So we moved from architecture on the left, coupled applications and devices, to architecture on the right, decoupled application devices, which is an MQTT broker in the center. Last year in this room, we introduced a lightweight, limited, low-cost ignition module suite, Ignition Edge, and that was really to allow people to have both ignition panel, so you could have the HMIs for field devices, and then enterprise connectivity with Ignition Edge Enterprise, and then MQTT by Cirrus Link enabled field device data to get through into the enterprise. Frankly, what's happened with all that is what brings me to today's announcement. A lot of collaboration has happened. The community, we have a fairly, as many of you know, because you joined us at our conference in September, a fairly aggressive and active community. And they're always telling us what to do. They're always telling us what they want. And then we Carl and Kobe established this, portal where people could give us their ideas. And believe me, they give us their ideas and they vote them up. And that drives a lot of our development timeline to respond to the community. And this became a different kind of response. This was, we need to start making smart devices. We need to collaborate more. We need to have more involvement with the Ignition platform at the edge. And our sales engineering division got involved, started growing in size and activity. And I'll let Kevin tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. And then we started seeing the demand in the overall marketplace for smart devices. More manufacturers are realizing that if you don't have smart software-enabled devices, you're not going to play into the infrastructure that companies are demanding. And we really have to have that connectivity all the way from the edge into the enterprise. So frankly, they've been engaging us like never before. It's kept sales engineering quite busy in terms of what that means and where it goes. So in the last couple of years, we've listened to those people. We've started bringing more of that product there. And at the same time, there's been another trend that's happened. Ignition was, when we first chatted in this room 5 years ago, kind of new. We launched it in 2010. Well, the proliferation has been and the adoption has been very encouraging to us. We're very pleased to be playing a role in this transformation of the industry. And a lot of companies now have said, we did pilots, we're done with the pilot. These are some of the companies that I'd say are saying, we want enterprise deployment. We want to go across the enterprise. In the beginning days, it was sort of like SCADA. Ignition was SCADA. Well, then it was the new SCADA, because it was SCADA and a whole lot more. And now we're realizing, no, this platform has matured. It didn't sit still over the last 7 years. And now it's at a point where enterprise deployments are happening. In fact, the last 3, Pioneer, Reynolds, and Sugar Creek, are all presenting here at the conference. You have an opportunity to sort of listen to what they say about their deployments and where they're going. So I'm really pleased today to say, with that sort of as a little bit of a backdrop, that we are announcing the Ignition Onboard program. And it really is a response to the requirement by many companies for real IIoT strategies. The OEMs have decided they needed to have that power at the edge. The program actually allows device manufacturers to pre-install Ignition, and so then when it goes out to the market to their customers, they've got Ignition Edge or a full Ignition onboard to also give them something that allows that connectivity at a reasonable price. You're going to hear from a couple of these companies, not today, unlimited time, but tomorrow morning in the same next door, I guess, when we'll invite everyone to our breakfast. Some of the companies are Opto22. You can get the Groove Box and Groove appliances with Ignition pre-installed. Also, B&B SmartWorks, powered by Advantech, has Ignition on board on select devices. And the response is interesting. These other companies here are also participating in this program in various ways. A couple of years ago at our conference, we had like a few companies when we did Ignition Edge that kind of wanted to know about it. Last year, that number had tripled. And as it grows, you're seeing also this entire ecosystem evolve. With the work that Arlen Nipper and the team at CirrusLink Solutions have done with the Sparkplug spec, you have people who are making MQTT-enabled devices. They're bringing Ignition on board also. And in the aggregate, what's developing is a self-selection of people who say, you know what? This fits my business model. This is some of what my customers are asking for. I need to be responding to it. Our job, I think, with inductive automation is simply to say our product has to be the best so it gets selected because it merits being selected. None of our programs, quite frankly, Onboard is included, have anything to do that says, you got a quota, you got to sell our stuff, you must use our platform. That's really not part of how we think about Ignition. We think about Ignition as an empowering platform that allows you to build tools and applications on top of it and move away from the old world, which is take operating systems and coding on top of it. We don't need more coding on operating systems. We need platforms that are scalable and maintainable into the future. So I think there's what I would say are a number of reasons why it's perfect for this kind of a model here. One is Ignition allows you to connect to any device or system. You can install it on pretty much any device. It decouples devices from applications to the MQTT, as I already mentioned. Build and deploy any kind of industrial application, doesn't matter what industry. Unlimited licensing makes it feasible. I mean, just think about, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of sensors, thousands and thousands of PLCs in various devices. And you're going to charge by the tag, charge by the client, charge by the connection. What's going to happen to those projects? Anybody who wants to scale across the enterprise, their proposal will end up in the pending basket of a CFO somewhere and never see the light of day. It won't be affordable to get the benefit. And I think we need to think the whole package when you're bringing a solution to the marketplace. How does it work technically? How does it work economically? And bring those two together. And how to work, of course, organizationally. Open, modular, and vendor agnostic. I think these things all add to what are some of the key reasons that it makes it real compelling to move forward with the Ignition for an IoT solution. So I think what I'd like to do, tomorrow we can do demos and have a little extra time and stuff, but today I'm going to have Kevin come up here and give a little better picture of how, Kevin, you are actually assisting companies to actually make all this stuff come together and work. So with that, Kevin.
Thanks, Don. Sure thing. So I'm really excited about this emerging ecosystem that we have. So the Ignition Onboard program, everyone who's implementing Ignition and everyone who's implementing Sparkplug and MQTT, we've decided to put a few things in place as the Onboard program starts to grow. So we have a process that we go through with any vendor who comes to us and says, I want to do Ignition Onboard, or I want to do an Ignition device that's going to be compatible, or how do I get listed as one of your ecosystem or collaborating companies? So we set up things inside our lab. We have them ship us a device after we make sure that they're in alignment with things that will help our customers accomplish their goals. And then we'll go through and we'll vet the devices. We'll make sure that it connects to Ignition easily, quickly, and that it's something that will do what is advertised. And then we go through the process of getting them plugged into the program. A place that this has really been successful, we had a certain customer who had a problem. They've got about 100, 200 sites that are around the country. And their larger sites, they had existing implementations. They had existing systems that were in place. And that made economic sense to have them. But in the smaller sites, you couldn't really justify putting in a whole system. So you couldn't justify putting in a full SCADA system just for a small satellite site that was off to the side. The solution that we ended up coming up with was an ecosystem solution. So not just Ignition, but with some of these collaborating companies and ecosystem partners, we were able to put a full solution together. So you have Ignition, and then you had Hilscher devices that were publishing MQTT device diagnostics, edge diagnostics, and edge data up into a CirrusLink broker. That then took that information and pushed it out to seek for analysis. And all of these today are working in concert in this implementation. And this is just one of the examples of the types of platforms and the types of programs that people have done with Ignition. The thing that's really exciting for me is to see all of this coming together, see all of these companies coming together jointly to present something that is a holistic solution for our customers. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Don.
Thanks, Kevin. So I guess the point is, in the whole point of Ignition is to set up an ecosystem where you can bring together like-minded companies who want their technologies to work for their end user customers. And the importance of an ecosystem was one of the things that came out in a book that came out, I think this was released from at Hannover Messe last year in Germany, if I'm not mistaken. The gentleman, Mr. Schaefer, is a senior manager at Accenture. And I recommend the book. It's a really good read, but they really talk about the importance of ecosystems and where this industry is evolving. And in this book, they say ecosystems are often open networks of strategic business partners, and they are a company's competitiveness network consisting of cooperators, suppliers, institutions, customers, and other stakeholders. They are typically built around intellectual property stemming from one core partner. And I only say that because we believe our job with inductive automation is to build that platform that can be that core piece of intellectual property upon which people can build in the service of our mutual customers, the industrial organizations that have to utilize that. So really the point he makes in the book is to anticipate and lead from the front in the move towards an ecosystem. And I think the Ignition Onboard program is designed to actually push in that direction. And when I ran into Walt Boys this morning when we just briefly, I said, I'm gonna quote you, Walt, so please, I hope it's okay, or I'll have to pull this slide out. But I was reading Walt Boy's Industrial Automation Insider article from January, and I think he makes some really salient points. Not the least of which he mentions Ignition, but that being aside, because I'm totally objective in this comment, obviously. You know that, don't you, Bill? Yeah. But the fact is, he says the next 5 to 10 years will bring huge changes in process, discrete, and energy industries and automating them across the entire value chain. The concept of the automation app store, pioneered by inductive automation, and the modular building block concept of software design will significantly change the way asset owners see and use control software. I mean, come on, in the commercial space, or the consumer space, I should say, we've known a long time that people build apps on top of operating systems. We're saying build apps and put functionality on top of the platform. And basically, app-based design approach, I think, will have the agility and the things you need in order to make it all work. So just, if you haven't, catch the Insider article that Walt put together this last month. So I think that what I'll say, and then I'll leave my last minute and a half for any questions, is that this really, when you think of the industrial Internet of Things, we're saying you ain't going to have the industrial Internet of Things if you don't confront those things, because the things are what makes it all come together. So we're saying one thing at a time. We want this onboard program to build out the ecosystem. And frankly, what's happening is we're finding that very progressive companies self-select because they're listening to their customers and they're trying to figure out what to do, and they're gravitating to us. Then we have a responsibility to the ecosystem partners and everybody else who ultimately is the beneficiary of this, which is the industrial organizations. So I think in the end, we just want to respond to that end user activity. I think that's probably it. If there's any questions, I will take them out. Oh, I got to at least say this. We'll have more announcements this year, and also we invite you to learn more about it. Biscuits, Gravy, and Industry 4.0, use Ignition to connect your whole enterprise. And if you don't like the topic, hopefully you like biscuits. But we're tomorrow morning, and I believe we're right next door here. And Craig will appreciate your introduction tomorrow and stuff. So I did really good. I didn't overshoot my time. So time for maybe 1 or 2 questions from anybody. Yes, sir. Bill.
First of all, I didn't know if biscuits and gravy were a California thing. When I saw that.
They aren't, believe me. I'll have some yogurt. No, I'm just kidding.
One thing about those statistics about the industry readiness, how about the industry readiness of a bunch of suppliers? I know Steve founded the company out of frustration, right?
Yeah.
With the existing base of very traditional. You have a list of very, what I call pretty much
to what I think your question is, there is a landscape which I would say is changing, ladies and gentlemen. It's changing. And we're gonna have to respond to it. And that's what this conference is about, frankly. That's what the Open Process Automation Forum is about. We're participants in that forum. I was reading the whole design guide on the airplane coming out here last night and realizing the direction they're trying to go. But you're also trying to get lots of companies with a long legacy to change the battleship direction. I think that we have an advantage, to be very honest. We're not going away. We're agile, responsive. But I think all companies are going to have to respond. And the more end user companies do, I think what Exxon did and what you heard at this conference over the last several years, say, hey, we ain't buying that next expensive DCS system. You better change or you will be disintermediated, or whatever the proper term is. I mean, so I think companies are going to have to respond. And I think the progressive ones will, and the other ones may come a little bit kicking and screaming depending on survival takes over and they have to make adjustments. The reason this is all happening, as you know, Bill, is the end user industrial organizations are telling us we have to respond. Any last quick question from anybody? Not bad, huh? We're done. Please join us tomorrow morning next door for biscuits and gravy and some yogurt for the West Coast people.